I think one of the important things when you're a teacher of a brass instrument is to establish a good discipline in your pupil. And that really means covering all the bases. So, building up your technique, but also building up your musicality and, being able to tackle ever harder pieces because that's musically satisfying. So what I always ask my pupils to do, especially the younger ones, was to put an hour aside, a minimum. That's how long you need, really. And on that first 15 minutes, just to do long tones and flexibilities to get the chops working. So no running around playing top Cs or unnecessary, or just long notes, flexibilities. And then after that, 15 minutes doing scales, because scales are the basis, scales and arpeggios, I should say, are the basis of so much music. And it develops coordination, it develops your finger technique or slide technique if you're a trombone player. It develops your tuning and just general ability to tongue and coordinate, and that's very important. And then the temptation would be good to go straight to practicing your pieces after that. But what I would recommend is then spending 15 minutes doing studies, whatever you're using. I mean, on the tuba, a lot of us use Coprash or Arbon if you're a trumpet player, La Fosse if you're a trombone player. But you have some good study books. And then after you've been practicing for 45 minutes by this stage, then you start doing your pieces. What I'm trying to fight is a temptation to get the instrument out and then you go straight into the Haydn trumpet concerto or whatever. And that's not the way you're going to build up a good solid technique and a good sound. So if I can get people practicing the right way, I know they're going to develop, they're going to be discovering, their new abilities all the time, and they're about to tackle new music all the time as well. So I think for a young teacher, that is a really good lesson to be able to pass on to your students.
So you made me think of as almost as if you were a doctor prescribing four different medicines. And I think with students, they will take the medicine, but they don't know how to use it. So how as a teacher can you focus the student on being in the right brain space and having the right intention behind the skills? Because I think the student's intention to play their solo is always going to be there, but it's harder to focus them on healthy intentions where it comes to the 45 minutes preceding getting to the solo. And how do you encourage or influence a student's intentionality towards that first 45 minutes?
Yeah, you raised two really good points. And the first one I would say is you have to use your ears because all the time you'll be using your ears to hear the production of those long tones, listening to the pitch of the long tones, making sure the sound is good in every register, making sure your legato is good in those flexibility studies. So all the time you're using your ears. If you're not using your ears, you're effectively wasting your time. But the idea is to encourage, especially young players, to really listen to what they're doing all the time. And the point, which I think is very interesting, you should use the term, it's like taking medicine. That's very true. But what you're doing is you're developing diagnostic skills, I would say. So all the time you're trying to figure out what the problem is and then figuring out a way of getting over that problem. So, maybe if all your long terms go, wow, you know, you identify the problem. Oh, it's not starting neatly. How can I solve that? And you think, oh, maybe I need better, a little bit more air behind it, or maybe I need to have the embouchure a little bit more firmly set. So you're developing those diagnostic skills. And that's absolutely vital for any musician. And interestingly, it's also a very good, what they call a transferable skill, if you can diagnose problems and figure out a way of solving them, that's fantastically useful in other jobs as well, which I figure is one of the ways that people, it's one of the reasons that people love to employ musicians in other positions, because they know they have, that's one of the skill set the musicians have, this diagnostic ability.
It's really interesting that I'm really excited that you gave that definition because I just answered a question on Reddit for a student who was asking how they should practice. And I can't remember exactly. I think they were looking like exactly what, I think the question was, what should I be practicing? And I said, you need to, you've got your skill sets you need to practice, but you need to split your time between diagnostic, non-emotional, be a machine, and love or performance. And you need to spend your time with your technique and your skills almost like a computer where you're doing a diagnostic test to discover what isn't working and how to fix it. And then once you've spent the time there, you also need time in your day to practice what you love. So pick a song where you've put the time in and the diagnostics are correct, and you can express your love for what you're doing. And that's how to create a balanced practice session. But in my head, I was thinking, the student, I think the student liked the answer, but I thought your next question should be, well, how do I know what the diagnostic is? And I was thinking, if he asks that, I'm not sure, like I know how I would answer it for myself, but this is what you've described is a very easily attainable way to say this is how you find your diagnostics. Because I think it's the right idea to run a diagnostic test. But yeah, I think a lot of students are lost on exactly how to fix the problem or what problem to look for. And
Of course, it greatly helps to have a good teacher, because that's one of your roles as a teacher, is to try and point out these problems and find a positive way of tackling them. And it's one of the dangers of trying to practice and without a teacher, trying to teach yourself, because I have seen this. So I've seen people work very hard without a teacher, but often they can just take a wrong turn and they end up going far, far, down a dead end road, and it would have saved them a lot of trouble if their teacher had said, no, 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 this is the way you do that. Don't try and do that, because we know how that ends. So it is, I would recommend having a good teacher and having regular lessons. It makes things much, much easier. As my father, Denis, used to say, there's no point in perfecting bad habits.
I had a teacher who called it turd polishing. He said, sounds like you've just been turd polishing. You need to fix this and this. In my experience and myself personally, and what I see with private teachers all over the place is there's a huge fear towards changing a student's mouthpiece. I think the fear for teachers is what if I steer them in the wrong direction? What if I introduce in quarter one this mouthpiece, which derails them for the whole year? And especially on a college level, that's a lot of money that the students invested in taking a mouthpiece trainer that might run them in the wrong direction. Um, I don't know if there's an answer to that fear. I mean, it is a chance you take, I suppose, right? Or, in your experience with
Yeah.
working with collegiate students, is it a chance a teacher should take?
Yeah, I think, yeah, certainly in my experience of the Royal Academy, if the setup is wrong, the best time to change it is day one. Get get the setup right, and then you can progress. But I'd also advise, um, if you're in a student group, take it in turns to sit at the back of the hall to listen to your colleagues. It's very interesting, because sometimes when you're sitting right next to someone, you're not getting, the full picture. If you go to the back of the hall, it's incredible how, some people have a sound which really projects, and other people who sound great close to, it actually doesn't get to the back of the hall at all. And having done that, get them to listen to you as well. And, maybe try a couple of different mouthpieces so they can say, oh, that first one sounded really great. The second one, has got no bloom to the sound or whatever. So I think, that can be a very useful test sometimes.
Your years of being a teacher, I'm sure you've seen students who are wildly talented but not successful, or, wildly in like terrible equipment, but they found a way to success, you know. So what determines success in a student over that you've seen?
I think a lot of it is just down to perseverance and hard work, really sticking with it. I think, yeah, for any musician, you need a really solid grounding in technique. You need to be able to play at any dynamic in any part of the range. You need to be able to play short, you need to be able to play smooth, and that's all technique. But remember, technique is only a servant of the music. So there's no point in having the finest technique in the world if you haven't got the ability to use it expressively. So yeah, these you need to develop both sides of your playing, your musicality and your technique. And if you can get both things going in tandem, that's the way to success. Um, I think it's quite interesting looking at repertoire lists for orchestral auditions. And I know this is very well established in the US. There's certain pieces you have to know inside out, if you're going to be performing at auditions. But having sat on a few panels, I would say the number of people who actually get the music absolutely 100% correct is very, very few. I mean, if you actually analyze every single note and every crescendo and accent and dynamic, I would say 85% of auditionees wouldn't actually make it. They'd cheat a dynamic or they'd miss out a couple of accents or something. If you can really nail those orchestral excerpts and really do exactly what it says on the page, I mean, that's a pretty good start to doing well in an audition situation. Yeah, yeah, and to be honest, there's no excuse for not getting it right.
This is a tricky question, and I might not leave it in because it might not have a good answer. But what do you tell the student who says, I want to quit? What if it is the time for them to quit? What if, what's your advice to the downtrodden and perseverance?
Um, I, I wouldn't stand in their way, to be honest, because my feeling about, you know, learning an instrument to a very, very high level is that you put a huge amount of work in. And a lot of the skills you've developed are these transferable skills. And, I've had a lot of students who've uh, gone on to great success, well, often in the music world, actually, but not necessarily as players. So to be honest, I'm equally proud of them as I am of my pupils who've been very successful on the tuba. Yeah, I have one of my ex-students is one of the best rock drummers in the world, and I thought, wow, good for you. You're probably making a ton more money than you would on the tuba. And yeah, I have another one who's become a very, very important agent for you know conductors and soloists. But he learned all these skills as a tuba player, and he knew exactly what the life of a touring musician was like and what concerts are like, and he applied those skills to music management, and he's been hugely successful. So, yeah, I think often these things are decided for you actually, because there comes a point when if you're waiting for the telephone to ring and the telephone doesn't ring, you have to eat. You're going to be you're going to be out doing. You've got to make money somehow. So eventually you'll find that you know whatever you're making money at starts running your life, and you at that point you've really got to decide, well, this is going to be my career, and I'm not going to be a musician. I mean, sometimes it happens even before people finish college. I had a pupil who a couple of summer runnings, he got a summer job working in real estate. And it turned out it was really good at real estate. And he did a fabulous graduation recital. I mean, he was a really, really fine tuba player. And uh, I think the same week, this real estate agency offered him a full-time position. I saw him about a year after that. He was driving a brand new Porsche sports car. So I thought, yeah, he probably made the right decision there. Yeah. But for those who are really, they're really desperate to play, I mean, they won't be waiting for the phone to ring. They'll be out there creating their own work. And I'm very, proud of, students who've made their own work. They set up groups, they get gigs, and yeah, that's wonderful if you can, not wait for the work to come in, but actually be proactive in creating it. And there are all kinds of niches you can develop. You know, I know people who've gone down the contemporary music route, and rather than waiting to do orchestral gigs, creating brand new music with composers and doing really new things with instruments. And you think, oh, yeah, good for them. They're really advancing the repertoire for our instruments, and yeah, there are all kinds of ways you can promote yourself and your instrument. Yeah, there are always opportunities out there for if you have a positive attitude and you're proactive. One of my friends, yeah, he set up a group. Oh gosh, going about 20 years ago, and they had a couple of good arrangers in this brass quintet, and they did pop covers. They were doing all sort of Justin Timberlake and Madonna and whatever was current at the time. And people absolutely loved it. And they ended up doing a whole lot of kind of street band festivals. But also they got a couple of residencies in London. So that was, 2 nights a week. They're out doing their quintet, doing all these pop covers, having a lot of fun, really honing their arranging skills and playing skills. And yeah, it stood all of them, and it provided the basis of a successful freelance career.